Welcome in, everyone, to a long awaited episode of the Payne and Drain Show after a hiatus that was a lot longer than we anticipated. We last talked to you guys just before the start of the NFL playoffs, and now we're back at it. 2 weeks after the Super Bowl is when this episode will be coming out. We are in the thick of the Winter Olympics in Milan, or I guess at the end of the Winter Olympics in Milan, and the offseason has been going on for a couple of weeks now. The Lions have done some things. They've added some offensive coaches. The Seattle Seahawks are Super Bowl champions, and we have a lot to set up for this offseason. So, welcome in, everyone. My name is Zach Payne. I'm one half of the show, and I'm joined, as always, by my co host, Alex Drain. And, Alex, how are you doing?
Pretty good. I always start out at the start of the Winter Olympics feeling like, or the summer, either one, being like, I'm going to be so disappointed when it's over. I can't believe it's only 2 weeks. Like I have to, savor it all. And then you get down to the last couple days, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready for this to be over. Like I really enjoy this, but I can't watch like 6 additional hours of sports every single day and be unproductive for that amount of time. So eventually, I need to get back to real life, and it's been a lot of fun, a lot of interesting sports out there. But the hockey's towered above. Once that wraps up, though, got the combine, NFL free agency. We're in this kind of dead period where like the coaching stuff happened and then nothing has happened much for a little while, and now it's about to happen. So time to get back to North American sports.
And so, speaking of that, the NFL playoffs, we're not going to spend too much time on this, but we should recap a little bit because we have some laughter to dole out, starting with our favorites, the Green Bay Packers, who just managed to completely faceplant in that game against the Chicago Bears on Wild Card Weekend in the most predictable outcome of all time. Like everyone knew the Bears were going to get down early and then roar back in the fourth quarter. But the way that it happened was just so hilariously awful from Green Bay that that's the kind of choke that is going to linger mentally and with the team for a little bit. So if we go back in time a little bit, because I know you and I would have talked privately about this at the time, but what were your thoughts on how things flamed out for Green Bay?
It was an interesting game. I was at the Pistons Clippers game that night, so I missed like the first half, and so I come out of the game and like, oh, Green Bay is in total control. They're up 21-3 at the end of the first half. And then, I mean, they're still up 21-6 at the end of the third quarter. Santos makes that long field goal, still up 21-9. Like, I really was not thinking they were in that much danger. And like that first half, all the people that were watching the game making all these dunks on Ben Johnson and, another playoff fiasco, blah, blah, blah. And then it just kind of turned. And we've seen this happen many times in these sorts of games. I mean, the Chargers, Jaguars won a few years ago, like these titanic collapses, and it just sort of the ball gets rolling, and one team just can't really stop the bleeding, and Green Bay just didn't really have a lot of answers. And again, you had some special teams issues going on for Green Bay, and I believe they did fire their special teams coordinator recently. I
Yeah,
think I saw that
fire or
headline.
retired, like some sort of parting
Yeah.
of ways.
I mean, Packers fans have wanted that guy dead for ages. So about time, but you had the missed field goal in there, and it just kind of cracked the door open. And the Bears were the team of destiny this year, and the Packers, I think, just under Matt LaFleur. We've talked about this before, but they just really don't have any dog. Like they're a good team. They have good players, and they just don't really have the juice in those big moments. And it was two competing sides of the fate coin.
Yeah, it was quite a hilarious collapse. It was also quite hilarious to watch the reversal online because everyone had the Ben Johnson fourth down tweets ready to go throughout the game, and they quickly had to be like, "Well, no, hold on, but they won, so it's fine. You could like he was still stupid, but like it's like the fourth down referendum that everyone has every week is still hilarious." And then the Bears. Team of Destiny, it really seems like they were going to pull another one out against the Rams in the divisional round. The Caleb Williams Hail Mary to a wide open Cole Kmet at the end of the game to force overtime was one of the most bizarre like big plays at the end of the game I've ever seen, where it's literally just a heave and a prayer, and Cole Kmet, the DB, just runs away from Kmet at the last second, and the Bears force overtime. But then, of course, a Caleb Williams overtime interception cost them in the end, and the Rams are able to survive. Just a very weird ending for the Bears as well.
It's just classic Caleb Williams. Like we've seen him just do this nonsense constantly, and going back to his USC days, and it works, against all belief here in this game. But then you go into overtime. The Rams got the ball first. They end up punting, and you're just thinking like, man, the Bears did it again. I can't believe this. And then awful interception. And I know that DJ Moore. There was some discussion about the route he ran there. Did he fight for the ball enough, etc. But at the end of the day, bad turnover, and Rams drove and won the game on the field goal. I think they deserve to win very clearly. And, look, there's I guess, a distinct possibility that could be the last Chicago Bears playoff game ever played in the state of Illinois. Just going to put that one out there before they become the Indiana Bears.
Yeah, that that's a whole different can of worms with the Bears and what's going on with the stadium negotiations. I don't know how it's been so complicated to get this deal done to get a new building, but uh whatever.
Yeah, so I mean, I think at the end of the day, with these NFC playoff games, the big takeaway, and this was the Super Bowl take of just the NFC was a lot better than the AFC. And I think very clearly the Rams were the second best team this year. And I think the Bears are probably pretty darn good. The Niners were probably pretty darn good. The NFC was just a lot better than the AFC, and that showed out as the weeks went by.
Yeah, and so the Patriots obviously made the Super Bowl on one of the most bizarre Super Bowl runs of all time. They had the easiest schedule of a generation, and then they don't play a single real offense in the playoffs en route to the Super Bowl. And then they get there and they get squished like a bug by the Seahawks defense in the Super Bowl. And the question coming out of that game was, would the Patriots have beat a single NFC team in the playoffs? And aside from the Panthers, maybe the Eagles on a bad day,
It's
but
really questionable. I mean, the Bears are so volatile that it's hard to know, I guess. But that I just enjoy the fact that like ultimate chud take was proven completely true in the Super Bowl. Just like the Patriots are total schedule frauds, blah blah blah, and it's like, yep, they were. Like the people calling Drake May the schedule now is, and the funniest part is if you followed the MVP where Stafford beat May by one vote, and then there was the one guy that voted
Justin
for Justin
Herbert or
Herbert,
something.
and all these Patriots fans were attacking him. This was like it was the weeks between the championship games of the Super Bowl, and they were attacking him for like ruining May's legacy or whatever. And then that guy was completely vindicated by that Super Bowl performance because I don't know, I don't recall ever there being a schedule as like shocking as the Patriots. Like that is like a once I feel like in a lifetime thing to have a
Yeah.
17 game schedule that bad and then a playoff path that bad. I mean, just completely fraudulent.
Yeah, the most accidental thing. Like the Broncos would not have fared much better in the Super Bowl, but if Bo Nix is healthy, they easily would have gone to the Super Bowl, considering how ineffective the Patriots offense was against the Broncos defense. The Broncos just needed a little bit more, and they got absolutely nothing from Stidham at quarterback. So it was just a very bizarre situation there. But the Seahawks, they win the Super Bowl. One Kenneth Walker, the Michigan State former Michigan State running back, wins Super Bowl MVP, and he might be gone this offseason. That's going to be a weird one to track, but just spectacular from the Seattle defense and Mike McDonald and what they've built over there. They obviously won the Super Bowl over a decade ago with the Legion of Boom, and now they've got a new version of an elite defense that I'm sure a lot of the NFL is going to try to mimic in some capacity. And there are certainly some lessons that can be drawn from some of the elite defenses around the league and how well they performed in the playoffs that the Lions should probably take into consideration as well. Then, as for the Lions side of things, they've hired an offensive coordinator since we last spoke, as well as another offensive assistant. So starting with the OC. I guess we could talk about them in together. Drew Petzing, the former Arizona Cardinals OC, is now the Lions offensive coordinator, and Mike Kafka, the former Giants OC slash interim head coach, is an offensive assistant of some capacity. Those two, Kafka was originally a offensive coordinator candidate for the Lions, and he still ends up on Detroit's offensive staff, which makes sense because if Detroit has another good year, you have to imagine Kafka is going to be at the front of the line for a lot of OC opportunities this time next year as well. So, just initial reaction, because I know you were a little bit more removed from the OC search and you weren't as wavered by any or swayed by any of the candidates. So, what were your initial reactions to some of these hirings?
Well, I mean, I felt like, and I think we talked about it a little bit previously, but I always felt the OC search stuff was really overblown. Like they did need to hire someone because what the situation they had at the end of last year was just not optimal. Too much was on Campbell's plate. We saw a decline in the performance of the team in terms of just general preparedness and in-game decision making and those kinds of things when Campbell was too focused on calling plays. So they did need an OC, but the offense was still a good offense. They still scored a lot of points. I know that they need to get back to down success, and there was too much on explosives and blah blah blah. That's all true, but at the end of the day, it wasn't really the offense that did them in. Not basically the only two times, maybe three, I guess. The Green Bay game start the year, the Philly game, and then largely due to the OL, the Minnesota debacle on Christmas. But they also, in other key games, like the Steelers won, the Rams won, those were big games down the stretch. The Giants won, which, they end up winning that one barely. But the Vikings game, I mean, they scored points in those games. They couldn't get stops. So I always felt the defensive side was being underrated as what the main problem was. But it's still an important hire. So I was just basically sitting back, waiting to see what happened. And the reaction to this was really interesting, I feel like, because first of all, most people didn't know who he was when they hired him. Like he was not a tip of the tongue name necessarily. He was obviously in the search, but so much focus was on Mike McDaniel that some of the other candidates didn't get as much focus, and so I think a lot of people just didn't know who this guy was.
And I think there was also the McDaniel derangement where it's like anyone not named Mike McDaniel was going to be criticized because everyone hyper fixated on the one guy that they wanted.
Yeah, and it's a thing that we see, as I mentioned at times in the Detroit sports with trade deadlines and stuff like that. There's always some name that
It happened
becomes
with
the
Dan
guy that
Campbell. Remember, Sala was the guy that year that
Sala.
everyone
Yep.
wanted, and they were
Yep.
like, "Oh, who's this tight ends coach that we got stuck with?"
Yeah, so guys get definitely elevated to an outrageous extent where it becomes like all or nothing. We have to get this guy. So there wasn't a lot of people I feel like that knew a lot about Petzing at first, and then what comes out about him is funny in the sense that you have the NFL beat writers slash analyst type people that had come out and are like, okay, here are the facts, here are these, strengths and weaknesses, or what the track record says, and what we can expect. Here's how it may, blah 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 blah. All very analytical and database. Then you have the other side, which is Arizona Cardinals fans, who are like, this guy is worse than Hitler. I never want to see him, in the state of Arizona again. Like I would like to hit him over the head with a sledgehammer, blah blah blah. And it's like, okay. And I've said before that one of my things I do is the what I called the Nick Ritchie rule back in the day, where when the Maple Leafs signed Nick Ritchie, I was like, yeah, okay, I think he's fine. And then I went on a bunch of Boston Bruins sites, and they were like, I hate this guy. And I was like, hmm. Then it didn't work out in Toronto. So that became a rule I have, which is that whenever you get someone new, whether it's a coach or a player, you should see what the fans of the previous team thought. Because if they really, really hate him, it's not a good indicator. So in theory, Petzing triggers that. However, I also think football fans, for the most part, just don't have an understanding of how, like casual football fans, don't understand how OCs work, and just who is to blame for those kinds of things. And I felt like with the Cardinals, I was just kind of sitting there being like, I think these guys think their team is a lot better than it is. Like I just think their team isn't very good, and their coaching staff as a whole wasn't very good. I mean, I didn't watch much Cardinals football, but I did watch that one game against the Packers, and I did not come away feeling like this is like a good team. I did not come away from that thinking, man, this team is sick, and the only thing that's holding them back is their doofus OC. They've got so much talent. Like, man, this team is loaded. I was like, this team's got a few players. They're not very good. The precision doesn't look very good. Like, they just don't seem well prepared. How much of that is the head coach versus the OC? I don't know. But I think blaming the ills of the Cardinals on the OC is very strange to me when you consider the level of talent and the injuries.
Yeah, and the Cardinals, it's such a weird thing because on the surface, you look at why Petzing was brought in, and it's for the run game primarily and reigniting that. And you look at some of the things he did with James Conner a couple of years ago, and it's like, oh, those are some legitimately good things that the Cardinals were able to do on the ground. And you can see how, especially like if you want to focus on getting David Montgomery back in a more involved way this season, that is going to be probably a really good sign that Montgomery will fit into this system and that you can keep him around and keep him happy, all that. But the flip side for the Petzing naysayers, how much flexibility do we think Petzing really had with Kyler Murray as his quarterback? Where you can't run under center concepts. You just straight up can't. You can run pistol and you can run shotgun, but you can't run from under center, which severely limits your ability to effectively run the football. And you also are that kind of limits some of your passing concepts because Kyler, for as much as he's a fine quarterback in terms of his output, it's he's very specialized. It's kind of like the old stories of Ron Rivera and the Panthers coaching staff having to limit Cam Newton in his rookie year to one side of the field because he couldn't be bothered to go past two progressions, right? Like he's a specialized quarterback, and Jared Goff can handle a lot more information, and he's also a lot better under center and with the play action. So in theory, like you can stretch yourself to say, hey, this is why this could work. There are some red flags for, hey, this is why this might not work. And the real answer is Dan Campbell's fingerprints are going to be too involved in the offense for it to be bad.
Yeah, and that's why I was also never super obsessed with the OC search. Like Campbell's always going to have a role here, and I think that the higher Petzing should be viewed as a guy that will bring ideas into the room, and it's going to
Yeah.
be a collaborative process with Campbell, and then also with Kafka.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think with Petzing, a few things stand out. He was a Kevin Stefanski guy. He was with the Vikings and then the Browns from 2014 to 2022. Before that, Cardinals stint. And he has some ties to the Lions. He's a Ben Johnson friend from their Boston College days. I believe someone said he was in Ben Johnson's wedding, if I remember correctly. He also knows Hank Fraley, who was in Minnesota working when he was there with the Vikings. Kafka, I think, also was a quarterback with the Vikings at one point in time, very briefly. They overlapped, not closely because he was a player, but just something to point out. So, as always, there's a web of connections here. And when you look at the resume for Petzing, a few things stand out. As you mentioned, the rushing success. Now, the Cardinals fans were crafting a narrative that it had to do with Clayton Adams, who I think was the OL coach and the run game coordinator. Then he left to be with the Cowboys. And so the theory was okay, he went to the Cowboys, then boom, the rushing success vanished. However, there was a lot of injuries last year. James Conner was
Yes.
hurt a lot. They had a bunch of different OL combinations. Obviously, the quarterback shuffling. Like, there was a lot
And
going on.
well, they had their top three running backs all got hurt. Like Connor got hurt in like week three. Benson got hurt immediately
Benson, yep.
after. And then they were rotating between Bam Knight and Lions legend Bam Knight. And who was the other guy? I don't even know. But they were running. Oh, Michael Carter, and they're just rotating through these like practice squad fodder guys, trying to with no offensive line, and it's like yeah, Jacoby Brissett, and they're also down in all of these games because their defense sucks. And the end result is, yeah, Jacoby Brissett just sling it 50 times and see what happens. And Michael Wilson turned into Megatron down the stretch for no reason. But uh, like there are reasons, like there are excuses to be had. The one thing that is a little curious, and I don't know how much of this is coaching versus the player himself, but the Marvin Harrison situation, where this is a
Yeah.
generational wide receiver prospect coming out of and yeah, allegedly a generational, but a top 10 pick. And it's like, wow, this guy's going to be a number one wide receiver. And he's bad and seems very disinterested in doing anything. And it's just a very weird situation. So there's a little bit of like worry about how you could develop young talent, and obviously that applies to more than just the OC, but that is worth noting.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to bring up the MHJ stuff because that was brought up a lot by Cardinals fans. Like the flip side is what he was able to do with tight ends. I think that's maybe the biggest talking point for the Lions is the fact he was such a 12 and 13 personnel guy with the Cardinals, and now that's all the rage with the Rams, etc. As it stands right now, the Lions definitely don't have the personnel to do that. That could change in the offseason,
Oh,
but
they will.
it's
You
something to monitor.
assuming Laporta's spine is healthy, you can pencil in the Lions are going to draft a tight end at some point this spring. They'll probably sign another one, and Brock Wright's going to have to fight for his job. And the Lions are going to be one of the champions of this 13 personnel movement because that is right up Dan Campbell's alley for what they want to do. And yeah, if you play fantasy football, draft Sam Laporta next year.
Right. So that's something to obviously take a look at. I don't know, like I don't think the Marvin Harrison Jr. stuff is that relevant. It was a unfortunate byproduct of what happened in Arizona, but it's just they're not going to hire him to then like not use JMO. Right, like
Yeah.
it's they have established receivers. Like they're going to be a part of the offense. Whatever was going on with MHJ is what was going on with him. But Dan Campbell's in control. The personnel is the personnel. I think everyone's going to be involved. But the biggest story is the shift towards the tight ends potentially. He likes play action as well. That always made
Mhm.
sense. Like as soon as I
Oh
heard
yeah.
that, made sense. And then you have this tweet here from Al Karsten where they were like a top gap play rushing attack very little inside zone, outside zone. They were the number one power rushing game. I think it was last year. I didn't write down what year it was, but with Petzing's time in Arizona. So again, some of the things that they were doing more in the Ben Johnson era, it seems like bringing Petzing in is going to sort of restore that identity. And from that standpoint, you understand why Campbell likes him and what he sees in him.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes sense on paper. I think the most important part is was getting play calling taken away from Dan Campbell, and Petzing has multiple years of play calling experience. And you also have Kafka on staff that if for some reason you don't like what Petzing's doing play calling wise, you can give it to Kafka as well. And there's two experienced play callers that in theory should insulate you from ending up in a situation that you had at the tail end of last season.
Right. And so then the Kafka element, I don't know how much more to say on it because we don't know what his role is. I mean, he's a guy from the Chiefs, 2017 to 2021, working with quarterbacks. Then the OC under Brian Dable, then the interim head coach. That's all with the Giants. Sounds like he has some focus on the run game as well. People seem to like Kafka because the Giants played well under him in the second half. They fought hard and whatever you want to say. I mean, Dan Campbell got his first recognition after sort of stabilizing the Miami Dolphins back in the day when he was the interim head coach. So it can be a positive indicator. Not sure what role he'll have. It's just surprising that he's here. It's surprising that he's not an OC somewhere. He was interviewed for the Seahawks job with Kubiak leaving and didn't get it. So you have to think this will probably be a 1 year rental and then he'll be
Yeah,
hired as
and
an OC next year.
I also think it's one of those where he could have been an OC, but he's like, you know what? Let me go in Detroit. Let me go hang out with some elite talent, maybe learn something from like working with Petzing and Campbell, and then I'll be ready for the best OC job next year instead of taking a bad one with a lackluster team and just
Yeah, we're trying
hoping for the
the
best.
the Tanner Engstrand get fed into the meat grinder New York Jets OC job.
Whoa. Yeah, holy airball by everyone that was mad about Engstrand not being the Lions OC last year. Although, to be fair, the Jets are a different kind of disaster. So
Yeah, I
maybe,
mean, I don't know. Johnny Morton was the Jets OC, and then didn't get a
see,
lot better. I don't know. So
see you in a decade then, Engstrand, I guess. Like,
Yeah, but
But
it's interesting, obviously, adding Kafka to the brain trust. It felt like a lot of the people that were mad about Petzing, then the mood kind of improved when they hired
yeah.
Kafka, that it sort of rounded it out. It seems like they have a reasonable group of guys in there, and if they can have a solid OL, it should be a really good offense. Like my opinion's not changed there.
And also, it doesn't hurt to get some new blood in the building, and because you have to keep evolving, and there is a little bit of stagnation that came last year, and I think getting some new ideas, getting some fresh perspectives will only serve to make this offense better, which is not a bad thing. So, yeah, now, as we shift towards some of the more roster-based priorities, or I guess checklist of things that the Lions need to accomplish this offseason, obviously relating to the offensive stuff, the number one is center. You need a center or a plan at center. If you want to move Tate Ratledge over, okay, that it's a plan. It'll be more thought out than it was this time last year, after Ragnar retired. That is when everything just kind of went to hell. So the number one, get a center in the building. I don't know what that looks like. I'm not paid millions of dollars to tell you what that looks like. What I do know is that the whole Tyler Linderbaum stuff, relax. The Lions are not getting him because they cannot afford to get him in the bidding war that will ensue.
You would need a Decker retirement to make that
Yeah.
work financially, just because Decker's cap hit's going to be very large, and it just doesn't seem too likely. I did see former Lion Evan Brown. He's back on the market, if I remember correctly, and he knows Petzing from Arizona, so I guess
Yeah.
that's a possibility. I don't think he's been particularly good since he left the Lions, but it's a name to keep in mind.
But he was good in Detroit for what he was.
Yeah,
Like it was very clear
yeah.
based on his
That
time in
year
Detroit
when
that he
the year when Ragnow got hurt was at 2021, Campbell's first year, and he played center a lot of that year. Like he was good.
yeah. And he would be an upgrade on Glasgow. The bar is so low that he is a center. That is kind of where the bar is right now, is an actual center. So sure, it'd be a cheap option. I wouldn't mind bringing Brown in because he will be cheap given how he's played since leaving Detroit. And you bring it, here's a crazy idea. You bring in two guys and let them compete. That's what the whole Lions MO is competition in training camp. So I wouldn't hate that at all either. And if he ends up as your primary backup, at least you know you have a good center that can play guard in a pinch if you need.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the move Tate Ratledge to center idea at the moment. Like
No.
maybe later in his career, but I would like him to master guard first.
Yeah.
That he had a solid rookie year. Obviously, we've talked about him plenty and strengths and weaknesses and stuff. I'm very optimistic about how he can continue to develop, but putting a lot more on his plate. It being center when he still needs to learn how to pass protect is not something I'm that interested in. So I'd like to keep him there and then look for a center externally. I mean, we're assuming we're on the same page about Glasgow as a cap casualty here.
Yeah, a cap casualty at the is likely the outcome. If you want to bring him back after that for cheap as a depth option, sure, but it seems like he's kind of just cooked at this point. But regardless, Graham Glasgow cannot be a plan for a starting position on this O-line next year.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair.
So whether or not it is trade or free agency, I'm not sure. I don't think there are any real good centers at the top of this draft that you want to invest in as a day one starter, but you can also you can sign a veteran for a 1 year mercenary type deal and then draft a center on day two or day three. It develops as a backup this year that will eventually become a starter. I don't know. Again, I'm not the one paid to make these decisions, but that's number one priority for the offensive side. And then related to that, as you alluded to, Decker, we don't know what's going on with him. However, we do know that the Lions need to learn from their mistakes with Frank Ragnow and make a legitimate plan for life beyond Taylor Decker that is not just hope Giovanni Manu develops into a starter.
Yeah, I mean, it's always made sense to me that to use a first round pick on a tackle just because and people have talked about edge more, but edge is a deep
Well,
class, I guess, and so
we'll
maybe
talk
you
about
can
that in a
find it
second.
later. Yeah, I just feel like in general when I've looked at the most recent drafts and just generally who the best players are, like obviously there are really highly drafted edges who are very good, but there's also some edges found other places in the draft. When you look at the all pro Pro Bowl tackles, they tend to be first rounders. Not that you can't. I mean, Jordan Mailata was the big hit for the Eagles back in the day as a completely bizarre Giovanni Manu, he was the archetype that we were dreaming about years ago, but that's rare. That's the exception to the rule. Like a lot of these guys that are the great tackles and the guys that get talked about were top of the draft. So generally, I think to lean first round for tackle, just because that seems most convenient. It's better than paying for a UFA tackle, which isn't going to happen. They also never hit free agency, basically. Um, so I just think first rounder makes sense to me there. But it can't be set in stone. You always have to play the board and BPA and all that stuff. But just in my thought process, it logically makes sense.
There is a kind of weird conversation with that because there was obviously reports that came out this last week that the Lions are sniffing around the UFA market for tackles pretty intensely. And I understand the hesitation of using a first round pick, especially one that's pretty good, like 17th overall, on a player that's not going to play this year. I understand the hesitation to do that. I could see a world where they bring in a veteran to be a backup, knowing that Decker, like if he gets hurt, you have to brace for some sort of injury contingency because again, Manu showed that he's just not ready. And maybe you go through this year and you say, okay, we have a veteran that can provide stability next year, and then we'll draft in the first round next year. Maybe I could be talked into that, but at the same time, you kind of just have to play the board and see where it falls. Like there's no way to predict that. But like if Decker is going to play this year, I can understand the logic of waiting to draft a first round tackle until next year.
I feel like if you're the Lions to some degree, you need to give. I don't know how you would navigate it, but you almost kind of need a hard date with Decker.
Yeah,
Like we need to
you got to
know
set that
either
date.
way.
You have to be like, hey, tell us by because if you get through the draft and you're like, okay, we think Decker's going to play, and then a week after the draft he retires, you are screwed.
Yeah, you can't have like, especially right after the Ragnow thing. Like you have to
Yeah.
have a little more certainty and just work with him because it's interesting. I don't feel like we've heard a lot of news with him recently. Like there was the quotes he had in the locker room after the Bears game, and then there hasn't really been a lot of discussion since then. I mean, I assume he's back at home or whatever, but
Yeah.
I just figured we would have heard something by now. I guess.
I assume because we haven't heard from Campbell really since the end of the season. Holmes we heard from briefly, but that was right
Yep.
after the season. The combine's coming up, which is when we'll hear from them again. I'm assuming that's when we might get some more answers on that, or at least like be able to ask like, "Hey, what's going on with Taylor Decker? Have you talked to him? Like, what's the update there?" So we'll find out. We'll get those answers soon. But yeah, so those are the two big offensive ones. Obviously, backup tight ends and whatever you can get into figuring out the Montgomery situation. Those are priorities, but they're not the same degree of priorities as the offensive line stuff. Defensively, kind of torn. All of these kind of blend together, but it's all the theme of it is the front seven just needs a bit of a refresh. And this is where it ties into the lessons learned from some of the elite defenses this year. The Lions need to get faster in the front seven at linebacker, at edge, even at defensive tackle. This whole mentality of being kind of like a can crusher that just slowly squeezes the life out of the offensive line and squeezes a quarterback in the pocket. We have enough proof of concept by this point that that concept is very flawed at the least and downright doesn't work at its worst. So speed, that's it. And that really does start with the edge two situation. You gotta finally solidify that position a little bit more than you have that with all of these stopgap guys.
Yeah. Um, I don't have a big desire to bring back Muhammad unless it's a pretty cheap deal.
Which it
Um,
won't be. 10
I
sacks,
just
like
don't. I have no idea what he's going to get in free agency. Like, yeah, he had the 10 sacks, and you can very easily twist it that way. But the reality of it is, if if some dumb team comes in and pays him thinking that this is like a budding star kind of guy because of the 10 sacks, like credit to you. But for him, like get the bag. But
yeah.
I am not interested in doing that. And if that's what he's going to get, then I think you have to move on there. Like Davenport has to be out the door.
Yeah.
Pascal, I think, is a non-guaranteed deal for next year. So like, there's no harm in bringing him into training camp.
Yeah, so that was the thing that came out a couple weeks ago was that both Pascal and Onwuzurike are actually going to be back next year because of some clause in the CBA where if you miss a whole season or whatever, your contract just rolls over. So Pascal and Levi both are still in the building, which cool. Pascal as a fourth edge can compete with Hassanin in that role, I
Sure.
guess, for a depth role. Onwuzurike and Makai Wingo can battle it out for being the pure pass rushing three tech, I guess. Sure. It's just kind of free depth that it's depth that you're familiar with, but you also can't rely on them.
Yeah, you need impact talent at edge, and I feel like in free agency, you're not likely to get it necessarily. You can get a veteran type. I mean, I don't know how you feel about the like some people like the Bosas.
No, I'm good.
Not big on that one, but there's some other older guys out there. We've seen plenty of those ring chaser guys, and Khalil Mack's been bouncing around a little bit. I'm open to that, but you still have to draft it, no question.
Yeah, you have to. So again, is that pick 17? Is that a second round pick? Do the Lions trade down at some point in the first two picks to get a third round pick? Probably. And do you do a third round? I don't know. But obviously the board has to fall the right way. And we learned this last year. The Lions wanted to do something at edge, but they couldn't because the board didn't fall the way in a way that was convenient to them. So they just ended up punting. But you gotta get someone, you gotta get a legitimate starter opposite Hutch, someone that can play 60 or 70% of snaps, that maybe you focus on getting a pass rusher more and you can rely on Pascal or Hassani to be a early down run defender at the start of the season. Sure, cool. I'm open to that. But you need a pass rusher and a pass rusher with jump, legit get off, a legit good first step and that can burn around the edge a little bit, something that complements Hutchinson. Because if we flash back to James Houston's rookie year, the reason James Houston was so electric that rookie year is because he was something different than everything else that we had in Detroit. Everyone else is just stock, bull rush, slowly push the tackle back and create a little bit of pressure. Whereas Houston was a legit burner that, look, was he going to get a sack every play? No, but he was able to get around tackles and he racked up a sack a game because of it. And he got some quick pressure. You need those kind of guys. I love the Broncos model of the just having really good defensive tackles and then having burners off the edge, like Nick Benito, Jonathan Cooper, some of the guys they have over there. Obviously, we've seen what the Texans did. We saw what the Seahawks did with all the speed they have in the front seven. Just speed, speed, speed is what I want.
Yeah, I mean, the Houston thing's really frustrating to me because I always liked him. I thought he was obviously just out of nowhere was so impactful that year. And then, he went to Dallas this season, and I thought I didn't watch a ton of Dallas, but I remember he had a sack in our game against them and had some moments at least. He was never a perfect player or anything.
No.
But it always felt to me like the Lions' issue with Houston and kind of pointing out this philosophical issue is they're so dead set on stopping the run, right? That these like the speed rush archetype of the guy that sort of burns around the corner and then isn't holding the edge and then can get hit in the run game to that side is just something they're really scared about, and it's left them to fall in love with the Pascal types and John Kaminsky playing edge for a period of time there too, which is great, but you do have to have that change up in your arsenal. And
Oh yeah.
they've been lacking it, and hopefully they will see that and make an adjustment. But we'll see.
Yep. Number of interesting prospects this year in the teens range where the Lions are going to be picking, or at least slotted to pick at this point in time. They've got yeah, they'll have options, so that's going to be interesting. Linebacker, you also are going to need a new will linebacker because Alex Anzalone seems destined to go reunite with Aaron Glenn with the Jets, which good luck to him. Hope he gets his bag. I don't know how much you've been paying attention to this, but Anzalone's had such a weird kind of divorce with the Lions with some of the things that he's been tweeting in the last several months. It's very bizarre. Like he was beefing with the Lions social media team on Valentine's Day for some reason. I uh I like Ancelone when he's on the field. Man, off the field, there seems to be a weird ego thing going on.
Yeah, I first noticed it. I mean, obviously there was the holdout last year, which
Yeah.
wasn't Twitter, but is something to point out. Always felt a little flimsy to me. And I mean, I get what his argument was, but it just was never, there was never a side of anyone looking at it from the Lions angle that was like, yeah, they need to pay him. Like everyone was pretty much in agreement. It wasn't a super strong case from his standpoint in just an objective sense. So that maybe suggests some amount of ego. And then I really remember it sort of becoming noticeable when there was someone was calling him like Alex Calzone or whatever, and he was like yelling about like anti-Italian racism or whatever, like earnestly, not like the Sopranos meme, like legitimately saying this was racist against him. And I was like, this is weird. Like, I don't know what to say about that, but just something's a little off. And then now you had the Valentine's Day thing. It's just the vibes have been strange with him for a little bit now, and it just makes sense. I feel like to when you already paid Derek Barnes and you have Campbell, that is a starter, and then you've got Malcolm Rodriguez in the back pocket, and then whatever you want to draft or add to, it just has always made a lot of sense to me that Anzalone is a guy you're gonna just probably move on from this offseason. That's how I see it going, and I think probably his actions um, make that more likely.
Yeah, like it's just a very bizarre situation. So I don't know what you want to do at will, whether or not that's let Rodrigo compete for a starting job again. I probably would
I mean, he didn't
caution
look as
against
good
that.
as he did previously, but he was also coming off a major injury, like jumping in the middle of the year. I mean, I think he's probably best as a depth guy, and then maybe you're
And a
having
core
Barnes
special
move.
teamer.
Yeah, either
Yeah.
Barnes is moving to weak.
S-
It just depends on how heavy they're going to be on 4-3 again this year. That's the question. I
um,
mean, if they're going to be as much 4-3 as they were last year, then you have to pay somebody.
Someone posted a chart of with like the different base fronts that teams use and like how versatile they are. And you've got all the elite ones that are like sitting that mostly 3-4, but they have some multiple fronts in there. And you've got some of the worst defenses that play a little bit more 4-3. And then you have the Lions that are like so aggressively a 4-3 defense that no one is even close to them in terms of personnel usage. Yeah, that didn't work. Nope. I'm good. I'm good. I don't know if you want to move Derek Barnes, I'd be willing to hear that argument. I don't know how well Barnes would do at Will versus Sam, but at the same time, you paid him to be a starter, so you kind of need him to be a
You got to
starter.
use him somehow. No, I mean,
Yeah,
the contract doesn't
like
make sense otherwise.
so I understand they really value that Sam role going into last year and the year before when Barnes got hurt, but it didn't work. And this is kind of more of the philosophical stuff. It's like, where are the Lions like shifting their focus on defense? Like, what lessons did they take away from last year? Because you have to learn something. Like, there's no way you can justify running it back with the same scheme. You just can't.
Well, that's what we think, but
Well,
will they? That's the question.
well,
They've been very firm on this for a period of time. Now, obviously, the 4-3 stuff was Shepard's spin on it, but that
yeah.
makes it almost more concerning about continuing to do it because this is like his idea.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, though, I have a little bit more faith because it was a first time DC and it's like, oh, he tried a thing, it didn't work. Now we're going to see how adaptable he is. But I don't know. The other thing defensively, the safeties. Do we have safeties? That is the question, the biggest question on this roster. The Lions obviously heading into last season very easily had the best young safety duo in the league. And now we sit here after the Super Bowl, towards the end of February. We have no idea if Kirby Joseph is ever going to play football again. And Brian Branch has a torn Achilles, and his career might be permanently altered as a result.
Yeah, I have we gotten anything official on Kirby? I'm
Nope.
trying to remember
It
what was said by the team because there's been the whole Twitter doctor thing that we got sort of like
the
last season with those Aiden Hutchinson videos. We're now getting it with like it was like a
Kirby
screenshot of
Joseph's
his
of his knees with pins and needles in them.
yeah.
Hey, his knee is pins and needles. He's dead. But from what I recall from Campbell's end of season presser, it was the language used was not very optimistic. It was a lot
Yep.
more like we'll see if time will heal it. If it's a cartilage thing, yeah, it's a problem, man. And there's nothing you can do about it. Like, but if it is something that like genuinely could be a career ender for him, okay, draft a safety.
Yeah. I mean, I think
Like,
they have to draft a safety regardless, but
yeah, because you got to get Branch insurance anyways, right? Like you have no idea if
yeah.
Branch has lost a step because Achilles injuries are notorious career enders for a lot of guys, and Branch was hardly fast. So
I mean, I like Thomas Harper a bit, but not to like the extent of him being a 17 game starter.
no,
And then beyond that, they don't ever use Sione Vaki at safety, so you're basically looking at needing to re-sign some of the guys you're losing potentially. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to keep Avante Maddox.
absolutely. I
He
think
played well, and I don't think he'll be that expensive. I also assume he'd want to stay. I mean, he's from Detroit. He went to King, so like you'd think he would want to stay here. Maybe you can work
the
out a reasonable deal.
I think my logic would be Maddox is going to be a flex nickel slash safety.
Sure.
Harper can be a backup safety, and then you draft a safety and you just bring five. Not
Yeah, I
ideal,
mean,
but if Matt
there's a
if
world where there's a world very quickly where Maddox and a rookie are your starting safeties, or Maddox and like it just the Kirby stuff is so unknown to me. Like
yeah,
it's just so wide open.
the range of outcomes, like he could be perfectly fine for OTAs, and he's 100%. And hey, time healed it, and we're good, and we have an all pro level safety back in the mix, and our number one turnover machine on defense. And there's a world where he never plays again, like that. We have no idea. That's just the nature of it. He's obviously getting extensive treatment this offseason, so we'll see. That's a wait and see. But then Branch is the one I'm more practically concerned about because of the fact that he's not the fastest guy in the world and he got an Achilles injury. I know how instinctive he is. We also saw how important he was because as soon as he went down, the run defense fully died. But I don't know. I have a lot of reservations about that one, and I'd be strongly considering getting a box safety that can roam around a little bit.
I did see a headline about should the Lions bring back Melifonwu. I think that was on Prior Detroit a couple days ago. I
He'll
I
be
just
cheap
don't. He'd be cheap. He was good when he
if
played, but do we really need to go in another like
injured.
constantly injured guy
Yeah.
when this is what we're trying to work around in the first place?
Yeah, no, I'm all right. I'd rather the thing with Pascal and Levi, it's like, oh, they happen to have their contracts roll over, so cool, you'll take them back. But if it wasn't for that clause, they would be gone because
Yep.
you can't reinvest in them. So Melifonwu, you have the choice. Nope, I'd rather take my mystery box. For as good as he was, like you just gotta try some new things. And then corner, there's the Amik decision. Do you bring back Robertson? Depending on the price,
I feel
prop.
like with Robertson, it comes down to that 4-3 question.
Yeah,
Because like if you are going with 4-3 a lot, it's kind of a luxury you can't afford, I feel like. Especially when you have Reed and Arnold, and then you
yeah.
have, if you have theoretically Ennis Rakestraw,
I was gonna say, do you?
the first theoretical player in history, but and
Maybe
then
the
if you're
the real Ennis Rakestraw was the friends we made along the way.
I do like when he tweets like about like he has a pretty active social media account, and
Yeah.
everyone's always just like, when are you gonna actually play football? Like,
Well, it's not his
uh,
fault. His body's broken, but
yeah. So, but like if you're gonna bring back like if Rocky Yassin is cheaper than Robertson, which I assume he would be, I think that makes more sense just because
yeah,
you need to save some money to spend on safety. If you're going to be a 4-3 team, you're going to be playing nickel all the time again. Okay, then we can talk about it. But that comes down to a philosophical decision of where you spend your money because your corner situation is more steady than safety. The money needs to be diverted to safety between the two spots. And Robertson obviously has played mostly nickel, but corner is his backup. That's the theory of why you bring him back is he would be Rakestraw insurance or whatever.
it is really funny that corner is more stable than safety. And when is the last time a starting Lions corner played a season? Like a whole season. It's the most perpetually injured group on this roster. Terrion
I mean,
has
Terrion
four
was healthy the year before. He just wasn't any good, but he was
fair.
healthy.
Yeah, he just sucked. DJ Reed was Uh, but
Cam
he
Sutton
was
was
good.
pretty Cam Sutton was pretty healthy too, if I remember correctly.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. I guess
So
they're
you're
steady.
either healthy or bad, one of the two.
Yeah, you're either healthy and bad or
Yeah,
injured and
or
good.
injured and good.
It
Yeah.
that so hopefully Terrion and DJ Reed because and DJ Reed, man, tough year for him. He started off pretty good and then got hurt and never quite got it back. So we'll see coming into next year. In theory, he's a good corner. Part of that is also schematic that the Lions kind of gotta stop being so stubborn and stupid on third down. But it's the I don't know. The ever lingering question is just when will they change a little bit? So we'll wait and see on that. But those are the big points on both sides of the ball, the big roster voids that they have to fill. Then last bit of news, I guess, we learned a couple of days ago that Rod Wood is retiring and the Lions are going to need a new team president. Now, this should not have much to do with football operations, ideally. This is a lot more like the fan experience or building renovations and the middleman between ownership and Brad Holmes. But worth noting, Rod Wood, he's been here a long while and obviously got off to a rocky start when he first got the job and the whole Calvin Johnson bonus stuff. But I don't
So
know.
I saw the news and I was like, okay. And then you put it on the show outline, so I was like, I guess I got to look at this a little bit, see if there's anything notable to say. And then I did not realize that there were a lot of people with firm opinions on Rod Wood.
Oh yeah.
I went on a Pride of Detroit article in the comment section about the announcement that he was retiring, and people were fired up. There were people that were, like, thank you for your service, Rod Wood, and other people were very like, you know, good riddance to Rod Wood, get lost. And I was like,
Hey, this guy that basically does nothing for the football part. It's all just like, hey, this building needs to be renovated. Hey, let's get a different third jersey. Hey, let's improve the fan experience. Maybe they just blame him for the ticket prices or something. I don't know.
that's what it largely was. And I mean, I wrote down a few things in terms of the pluses and minuses of Rod Wood's tenure. Um, the first thing I have to note is my first memory of Rod Wood, which is I remember when he was hired because it was, if I remember correctly, it was middle of the 2015 season. I believe it was when they cleaned out Martin Mayhew. They were like 1-7 through the first 8 weeks of 2015, and if I remember correctly, he was airdropped in like in the middle of that. Let me look that one up, but it was around that point when they were cleaning out like the last vestiges of the Millen era. Let's
Yeah.
see. Yeah. November 19th, 2015 is what it says here. So, and I remember distinctly, like, because I was in high school at the time, and I remember being in the car, and my dad always listened to 97 on the ticket. And I just remember that day, all these people on the radio were like, Lions have hired a new president, Rod Wood. It's Rod Wood, not Ron Wood with the Rolling Stones. It's a different guy. But, um, and, I think since that time, I would say positive bucket, the franchise is objectively miles better off than they are in 2016, 2026 than they are in 2015. Like,
That
yeah,
bar might be underground, but
yeah. I mean, they were better in 2015 than they were in 2008. So, credit Martin Mayhew there. But Rod Wood did push things forward. It went backwards at first. The Quinn Trisha fiasco.
but that falls back to the nobody in ownership cared or understood football or knew anything. So they had the league help them out. And when the league intervenes, it's very rarely a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I remember distinctly that hiring process for Bob Quinn. Like, we were all really happy that they were using a search process. I don't remember. I don't know how much you remember that, but like, because I mean, Millen was just a TV guy that they
Yeah.
hired, and then they fire Millen and just promote his second in command, who was a lot better. Give Martin Mayhew credit for that, but wasn't good enough. And so the fact they were going outside the organization, and obviously it should be noted the history of the family, the Ford family, with uh, just people that were hanging around because they were friends of the family and they were well liked. And, I mean, Russ Thomas, obviously, most notable example of this. But the fact they were going outside the org, going outside their friends, although Rod Wood was not. Rod Wood was someone they knew from Ford
I was
Motor
gonna say
Company and
like
was
that
very
was
close. And that
that
was the concern with Rod Wood at the
the
time.
nepotism.
Yeah, but then he leads them into this search process that was actually official. They got Ernie Accorsi and like consultants to come in and help them, and they brought in Bob Quinn, who was very much outside the organization, was very different than what they had done before, and I think people were pretty happy at first. I mean, people liked Bob Quinn in the beginning. I remember all the memes of him and the baseball bat and that stuff. I mean, he started okay, but then things went downhill. But Rod Wood got it right. He was in there with Spielman and Sheila and hired much better leadership. So I think ultimately that's the biggest thing people will recall.
Yep.
Um,
And the process the second time around when they were going after Holmes and Campbell, like I remember the stories coming up about this panel that they had hired to help them make that like of Lions legends to help them like make the decision. And it's like, okay, we're gonna get a whole team in here just to help with the search process. And then it like they interviewed everyone under the sun. Like it was the most it was actually extensive. It's like, okay, granted that was also when Martha Ford stepped down and Sheila
yep.
took over. And so there was kind of a reaffirming of the just seriousness of ownership at that time. And it's like, hey, we're gonna try now. And so that's probably part of it.
Yeah, so that's the biggest one. And then I mean they upgraded team facilities and I know in
Yep.
Allen Park especially has been talked about.
Mount
Uh
Patricia.
yeah, uniform changes either is good or bad depending on who you are, I guess. All I'll say about that is they need to do the blue and silver pants. Got to stop with the all blues. I know I brought this up many times, but that's more on the players because I think they select which ones they want to wear. But the redesign of a couple years ago was really good. I'll give them credit for that. Really sharp. So and then the 2024 draft that was like their crown
Yep.
jewel. That was what Rod Wood was there to do. He also was supposed to get the Super Bowl back maybe one day, but not in his tenure. It's hard being a northern cold weather city. Generally, you only get it if you have a new building. But maybe one day. So those are the pluses. My question mark is the cheerleaders. I have no take of that, but that was Rod Wood's legacy. That was something he did. It was different. The Lions were one of the only teams without cheerleaders for a long time, and then he brought them in. So
Yeah, I've got no
shrug.
comment on that one. Like, cool, I guess. I, I,
uh,
I, with the next president, I think my biggest question is how is the fan experience going to change?
right, and that's the negative is the rising prices, which is seems to be the area of ire as well as the Calvin feud, but the Calvin feud has been solved, so water under the
And
bridge.
you can chalk that up to a businessman not knowing football culture coming in and not knowing what's what and being like, well, hey, this is legally this is how this works, but not understanding like kind of the nuances of player relations. And I will say the ticket prices is hilarious because the Lions were awful for a long time. They get good, and instantly their ticket prices are the most expensive in the league.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the ownership and the business side would argue that they were just catching up, right? That the prices had been depressed for so long that now they're trying to make that money back. And I mean, I do think it's obviously unreasonable to expect them to remain at
Well, yeah.
12 prices, 2008 prices. I mean, we had season tickets in the 2000s. I mean, we couldn't give those away to people. I mean, obviously they weren't selling well on the open market. Obviously the tickets weren't cheap, like or were cheap, right? Like it's just that's what it was back then. Now it's a different ball game. They do need to, I feel like, find a way where you can kind of balance out the luxury tickets and the corporate sponsorships and all that stuff with other tickets, maybe in the upper decks that are more accessible and that kind of thing, and just kind of meeting in the middle somewhere. I think that would be a wise thing to do. It's just the ticket price thing is just going to be sticky. It just always will be. People got accustomed to it being dirt cheap because the team was always bad, and now they're good, and so it's I don't know. It I don't really. I'm not going to put it too much at the feet of the business people because I just generally assume that is what's going to happen. In
Yeah.
Tickets are outrageously expensive for everything. Like, look at the World Cup tickets. Look at Michigan's playing Duke in basketball tonight in Washington, D.C., and it's like $400 to get into that building. I mean, it's just, it
Unless the
is what
team
it
is
is.
bad, it's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
Like
So,
the
and I think
is
the
what it is.
final legacy of Rod Wood is just really like how he facilitated the transition from William Clay Ford to Sheila. Like that ultimately is what I think we remembered the most probably is just that decade of gap when they went from having one owner for 50 years to a quick change of a couple new owners that were different and were women and were not as experienced necessarily. I mean, I think in a sort of historical comparison, he was kind of like when Churchill like taught Queen Elizabeth how to be the queen when she succeeded to the throne, and right, like that was a role of British prime ministers is like to teach the new royal what they're supposed to do. He kind of was
Mhm.
doing that in some ways, especially for Sheila, like getting her feet wet, and I think now she's probably ready to roll, and I think people have been
Oh
pretty
yeah.
happy with Sheila as a whole, and so I don't know who they'll hire. I didn't go on LinkedIn and make a power rankings of who the candidates are, but whoever it is, I think will be walking into a really solid situation and with an owner who knows what she's doing. And
Yeah.
my only request is to keep it on the business side and
Yes.
not have
Though
football interference.
if they bring in a football person, all the alarm bells are going to start going off in my head because for whatever you think of the Holmes and Campbell, like whatever you think of them and their direction with this team, they're in lockstep. They have a vision for what they want this team to look like, and they're in sync. If you bring in an outside perspective that's going to force them to change course, that's when things are going to get messy, and that's when things are going to go off the rails.
Yeah, I mean, I saw people suggesting Spielman. Uh, I just don't think he has the business chops for that
No,
necessarily.
I think you bring in someone external that's a true businessman. Who knows? Maybe they'll just bring in another Ford employee and be like, here you go. But yeah, we'll see. Last thing.
I actually, I'll say this real quick. He's not going to take the job, but Uh, Jim Hackett was the CEO at Ford. He was briefly Michigan's athletic director in an interim basis after Dave Brandon was fired. He came into Michigan. He hired Jim Harbaugh, completed the heist to get him out of the NFL, and then he left. He was the best AD Michigan ever had. He worked at Ford. He's 70. If he'd like to do 5 years, I would be fine with Jim Hackett doing 5 years with the Lions. Just put that
There
one
you
out
go.
there.
Hey, it fits if the shoe fits with the Ford employee. So, um, yeah. Last thing that we'll quickly mention: the combine's coming up. I know we talked about it earlier, but we'll get to hear from some of the Lions coaches and Holmes again. The combine has definitely changed a lot over the last number of years because the actual workouts don't matter nearly as much anymore, especially with all the trackers that are in all the players' equipment when they play. So it's a lot more important for the players to just speak to the media and speak to the teams, more importantly, the team interviews. So, is there anything that you want to hear coming out of the combine or anything that you're especially looking forward to?
I mean, the biggest thing with the combine to me, just in general, is like what players are the big risers out of the combine, and like how does that shake up the draft board? But in terms of what I want to hear, nothing. I mean, I don't care about it too much. I look at the RAS scores and just see what movement it brings, and not a whole lot else generally.
Yeah, so we'll see what Campbell and Holmes have to say, and if we get any answers on a Kirby or a Taylor Decker or anything of that nature. But aside from that, I think that's where we're going to call this one. So first show in a little bit. Good to be back recording, and we'll record again sometime before free agency and do more of a comprehensive external look at some of the free agents that we think might be intriguing to the Lions. But aside from that, thank you so much, everyone, for watching or listening. If you're on a podcasting platform watching, if you're on YouTube, make sure you hit like and subscribe on YouTube and follow and leave us a review if you're on a podcasting platform. You can follow the show on Twitter at Payne and Drain. You can follow me at ZachPayne41, Alex at Alex_Drain, and we will see you guys sometime soon. And aside from that, take care, everyone. Cheers.